Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. Summer is pretty much in full swing here. We're doing a lot of fishing at the Fair Chase and scouting. And so starting the summer scouting, it's always exciting. I look forward to kind of do it all year. And I figured as we get into it, I might as well have Gregg from Tactacam on to talk a little scouting. So, Gregg, how the heck are you? It's been a while since you've been on the podcast.
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be back. Sitting in a different chair this time.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, good to be back.
Yeah, it's you're like a bad penny. We can't get rid of you. You're gone for a little while. You come back, and whatever. But no, appreciate you coming on. And remind everybody where you're from.
Yeah, so from Wisconsin, born and raised here. Spent a little bit of time out west. Lived in Idaho for about 4 years, and then eventually moved back. So being kind of a tried and true whitetail guy, the Midwest has always kind of held my heart in terms of where I wanted to be. So yeah,
Yeah,
definitely planted some roots in the Midwest here and plan on staying.
yeah, big whitetail guy. I
Yeah.
mean, we do West things. Us being from Michigan and you Wisconsin and everything. But like, at the end of the day, most of my time is spent chasing whitetails right in my backyard. Like, as fun as all the big adventures are, it's like still 90% of my time is that.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a good elk hunt, a good mule deer hunt. Try and get out and chase antelope as much as I can every year. But I, I'm like in a lot of like Western people's eyes, like I'm the weird guy that would give all that up to sit in a tree stand. Like if I had to choose one, it's still going to be the tree stand.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's like I always like whitetail better, and I think I would think differently if I was from out west. But it's like it's the thing that I know best. So I feel like every time I go hunting, it's like I get to learn something new. I'm trying something new. I'm totally on my own. It's like every time I go out, I'm doing my own kind of thing and working out a new plan. But every time you're out west or whatever, it's like I got a week. I gotta like make it happen. I can. You're. It's just like your learning time frame is like much more you know, like shortened when you're out west. Out like here, it's like I can hunt every day. I learn, what mid October is like year over year after hunting all of the days of mid October to see what deer do then or whatever.
yeah,
Not west, like I said, it's just like you're go go go, try to get it done, and it's like hopefully it works out. You
for
know,
sure. Yeah, I think it's all perspective, right? It's like
right?
what are you used to? What do you get to devote the most of your time to?
Yep.
What are you kind of drawn to? And I think a lot of it comes from, yeah, like where you're centrally located. If you can go scout elk all summer, right, and then put a plan together for your hunt in September, it probably feels different than for someone like you and I, right, who just goes out there for a week or two in September and has to try and get it done.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this on our last podcast, but people out in our area, I mean, Wisconsin, especially in Michigan too, it's like I hear a lot of them like, oh, it'd be so great to live out west, go. But like you get to hunt with a ton of tags that are pretty inexpensive, especially if you're in state from like September in Wisconsin, like into January. Like that's a crazy long season. And like out west, it's like these guys a lot of times have like sometimes they don't have tags. A lot of buddies we have out there. It's like I didn't draw a tag. I got to go elsewhere to hunt. It's like no, you get to hunt every single day. Like these are sportsmen's paradise states that people they sleep on. I think in that way.
Well, and not only like in state, right? But like we're kind of in this mecca of an area where you can jump from, across state lines pretty much in
Yeah.
any direction, right? Like south, east, west, to neighboring states and grab, and it's not true for all of them, but for a lot of them, you can grab another over the counter tag. So it's like you could be hunting, whitetails in multiple states. Like, for example, like Wisconsin, we only get one buck archery tag. So,
Right.
if I'm lucky enough to fill that early in the season, I can go to Minnesota, I can go to Missouri, I can go to, you name it, up to Michigan, whatever, and I can
Yeah.
be still be hunting.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. We'll be out in Wisconsin this year, by the way, chasing whitetail. It's like we're planning this hunt. My wife's like, "Well, you're going to be so far away." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm going to be only a couple hours away. Well, if really something you need me back, I'll just drive home.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a sweet deal, and Wisconsin's sweet. So, well, I have you here, because you're part of the Tactacam team, and for people who follow us or you or know about Tactacam, it's a great it's a great trail camera tool. Like it's a great scouting tool, and it's something we run. Well, I used to start running it like end of August. To be honest, that's when I would start to throw it out. But lately, I just leave it out more and more with things like cell cams and stuff, because like I get to see throughout the year videos and pictures of stuff going on, which is just a wonderful thing. It's so exciting when my phone buzzes and some little buck went by or something, with velvet on. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I say it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like, there's a lot of days where I need one less thing to look at my phone for. But,
Yeah.
um, I mean, honestly, I think what you just said is really how, I've kind of evolved. A lot of people have too, in terms of like with cellular cameras, how we can use them to our advantage. Like, how to use trail cameras, using trail cameras, like, that's not a new thing, right? Like, trail cameras
Right.
have been around for a long time. But I think, what we're really learning and what people are really starting to cue into is there's a lot of information and data, to be extracted and learned and used year round, right?
Yep.
And, yeah, obviously that starts about now. We're in June. For me, it's always like basically from like the middle of June to that first week of July is kind of, it's like, okay, it's time to start getting boots on the ground, getting more cameras deployed, really start to see like what kind of deer I have around in these summer patterns. But, you could fast forward into the season. Like, obviously there's a lot of, low hanging fruit in terms of like how you can use them in season to your advantage for how you're going to hunt deer, what specific deer are doing. But like, even those out of season times, right? Like, after season is over, it's really advantageous to know, when do bucks start dropping antlers? If you're
Yep.
somebody who does shed hunt, like, that's great to know. But it's also a good way to kind of know like what's going on with the deer herd. Are they healthy? You can be using it to look at your buck to doe ratio in off seasons. You can be looking at, in the spring, just a few months ago, I guess it depends where you're at. Like a few months ago to now, it's like, how many does have fawns? Do they have a single fawn? Do they have two fawns? Just like there's stuff that you can learn all year round as it pertains to like where you hunt, the health of your herd, what those deer are doing. And a lot of that then all comes together in terms of like the plan you're putting together to hunt those deer during the on months during the fall season.
For sure. And I do hear this sometimes, and I do uh understand it, because there's a lot of people who are like, well, I'll just throw a camera out, I'll never need to set foot in the woods, and I don't need to learn how to be in the woods or use my woodsmanship skills, which I get that, but my perspective is always like, that's never been the temptation for me. There's never been like, how can I spend the least amount of time in the woods and get away with it, and by putting trail cameras. For me, it's like, man, I'm going to be out there anyways, but if I can get a camera seeing something when I'm not there, I'm just interested, even if it's like something cool happens in the woods and I'm like just kind of like a fly on the wall with my trail camera to see what's happening. Like, it's totally worth it and totally cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a great point there, right? Like, and I'll be the first one to tell you, as somebody who works for Reveal, right? Like, Tactacam Reveal is a trail cam company. I'll be the first one to say this. Like, it is a tool, right? Just
Yep.
because you give, I always use this like construction worker analogy, right? Like, you could give somebody the latest and greatest pneumatic nail gun, right? But if they've never, like, if they don't know how to frame a house, like, just because they have this tool doesn't mean that they can now go frame a house, right? And I think like trail cams are no different. Just because you have a trail cam out there doesn't mean that like that replaces all the other stuff that you just talked about, like true woodsmanship, understanding how to scout deer, understanding how to read maps, like
Yep.
understanding how deer patterns change, right? But it's something that can really help you towards that end goal. And for me, it's always about like finding that balance, right? Like, you got to have boots on the ground. You got to understand, the skills that come with being, a good or having good woodsmanship.
Yep.
And this can help you towards that, but it doesn't replace that, right?
OnX is the title sponsor of our podcast here at the Fair Chase, and it's a must-have app for all of us who love to explore the outdoors. Whether you're hunting or hiking or fly fishing, OnX gives you detailed, accurate maps right at your fingertips. With property boundaries, topographical features, and trail data, You'll always know where you are and where you're headed. You'll also likely be able to figure out where that big buck is headed to. Plus, their offline maps mean you're covered even in the most remote locations. OnX is the ultimate tool for outdoor navigation, making every adventure safer and more enjoyable. Download OnX today and explore with confidence. Yep, that's where I'm at. And I know I'm not one of those guys that at the same time that throws out 40 cameras a year. I just never have. I look at whitetail hunting as like, I just like to learn about it. I like to know the woods. I don't know, even if I don't shoot a buck or whatever, I still just love that I was out there. And it's like, oh, now I know a little bit more. And I feel like building the kind of body of knowledge, to me at least, is like some of the most exciting part. Just learning and learning and learning and being out there and experiencing new things and seeing what the woods are like. So, trail cameras are helpful, like you said, for that. But there's really, at the same time, there's no replacing just being outside and actually being in the woods. And you have to even do that to know where to put the trail camera anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good
So,
point. And I think the other thing, like when we start talking about kind of like trail cameras and their place in somebody's kit, is you know, a lot of it is like what you want it to be too, right? So like for
right.
somebody like yourself, it's like it's a tool to learn more. It's a tool that, like you said, you're going to be out there anyways, and you kind of like need to know where to put these things, and you've learned where to put these things by your time out there. And for other folks, they take it a whole step further than that, right? Like, whether you're hunting, let's call it big parcels of land or small parcels of land, like maybe your goal is to shoot a mature buck, and maybe like with where you hunt there's only one or two of those, right, that meet your requirements, whatever that might be, right? And I'm not saying a mature buck has to be 4.5 years or 5.5 years old, but for some people, like, you're going to
Yeah.
decide what that is for you. And if there's only one or two of those animals in the given area, right, that you're hunting, it can be a super valuable tool to not only find those animals, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of times, like during certain parts of the season, they're not moving during the day when you can physically be out there and see them. But
Yep.
it allows you to find out that they're there. It allows you to start kind of tracking like what their patterns are, what their movement characteristics are, and really formulate a plan in which you otherwise might not be able to do, right? If you're only relying on your time spent in the woods, whether it's learning that area or seeing those deer
Yes.
on the hoof. So like it can be that extension too for people, right, who really want to take it to the next level.
Yeah. It gives you a fuller picture because you don't always know what's going on when you're not there. And of course, you do things like read sign and so on to make guess. But there's still just wild things that happen. And like I said, plus it just the things that you have show up on a camera can be hilarious and awesome. The other day I threw a camera out 2 weeks ago, and I get a picture like a couple hours later, like that night. I put it out in like the late afternoon, and that night at like 4 in the morning, it's over a creek crossing, and it's a spot by where I in Michigan where we have not historically had bears, but we've started to have bears. And they're starting to show up more. Like I called one in turkey hunting last year, and in this area, and then one walks past this lady's garage, and she took a picture of our neighbor up there, and it's just 400-pound black bear or whatever. So I put it out, and I'm like, sweet, I'm looking for deer. It's a spot where I shot a nice buck last year, and just trying to get a sense of what's there this year. I think there's a good deer there, but anyways, I see in the trail camera just kind of like a big round thing that's dark and with a glowy eye, and it like looks to be the right size, and I'm like, that's a bear, that's freaking sweet, I'm so excited. Well, I do the thing, and I get so many of these, the request a video
Yeah,
option.
yeah,
I spend so much money requesting videos in a year. So it's like, oh, requesting a video. I'm going to see that bear walking by, and I'm telling everybody, look at this bear, showing it up. And like the video shows up, and it's just a raccoon closer, but it was just like at a weird angle, so it's
yeah,
seen farther away.
yeah.
So it's just fat raccoon. So, um, you know, trail cameras it keeps you busy for a while in the off season, debating what you're seeing on camera and everything else. But with that being said, I guess the first question, and it's something that I'm thinking about right now, is like, when you're scouting in the summer, you're not necessarily putting your trail camera where a deer will be in the fall. And so I don't, right now I'm not typically putting my trail camera where I'm going to be hunting, say, October 10.
Yeah.
It's generally a different spot. So right now, what I like to do is use trail cameras to get a sense of what's in the woods, like what's out there. You can read sign, you can look at tracks, but this you get to see like, all right, there's X amount of bucks in here, and there are this age group, and like this is what you can expect when you're here. So, is that how you'd go about it? Where are you looking to set up trail cameras, like July time period?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are on the same page here, right? And like, I think a younger version of myself would have answered this very differently, right? And it's like something that I've kind of evolved how I use these and what I use them for this time of year. But yeah, I
Yep.
mean, right now, the great thing about this time of year, right? Like, and I'm speaking specifically like from somebody who is trying to find a buck or a number of bucks that I want to hunt this fall, right?
Yep.
That might not be everybody's goal or objective, and then like
Okay.
your the way you use these things may change. But for me, that's kind of like where I'm at, right? The great thing about summer patterns and deer this time of year, especially when looking at bucks, is they're typically bachelored up, right? So they're in
Yep.
groups. So what I'm trying to do is like, where can I put a camera that's going to get pictures of these groups of bucks? And typically, right now this time of year, like that's going to be either on or near a food source. So I'm looking at either catching those groups of bucks going to the food source, right?
Yep.
Like coming out of the food source, or if it's a place where I can actually get pictures of them in the food source, like that's great too. And what I'm doing is I'm just strictly inventorying. It's like,
Yeah.
how many bucks do I have in this area? How old are they? At this point, we're starting to see antler growth. So, like, what potential size, do certain of these bucks have? And I'm just trying to get an idea of what's there. And I do that in, a number of different places. So I might have, let's just for conversation's sake, right? Say I have a handful of spots, 5 spots that I typically like to hunt or will, put time into. This
Yeah.
is the time of year where I'm trying to figure out. It's like, okay, of those 5 spots, where am I very likely going to spend the majority of my time this fall? I try and narrow it down
Yes.
to one or two, right? And then what's going to happen is, come and again, geographically, it somewhat varies a couple weeks, but right, like come beginning of September to middle of September when these bucks break out of their bachelor groups, they kind of transition to fall patterns. They're not going to be in the same spots at the same time. They're going to be by themselves. But then I'll switch my strategy and then
Yeah.
use those trail cameras to try and hone in on what they're actually going to be doing the rest of the fall. But
Yep.
for right now, it's just like, where do I want to kind of concentrate and spend the majority of my time based off of what I'm seeing in that area when I'm doing my inventory?
This episode is also brought to you by 2O Gear, innovators in technical hunting clothing. 2O is a newer company. It's based right here in Michigan, and whether you're hunting elk in the mountains or chasing antelope in the plains or traipsing through swamps after that ruddy buck, 2O has you covered with premium jackets and pants, merino wool layers, everything you could possibly need to stay comfortable in the woods. Their products are engineered for functionality and durability, ensuring you stay protected in any conditions. Plus, their camo is really effective. We're big fans. So don't take our word for it, though. Go to 2ogear.com and check it out. Are you, is this mostly public land, private land? Where
For
are you
me, it's
looking?
a mix.
Yeah.
So, like where I'm at in Wisconsin, I have a handful of spots, 3 of which are private land. So, a couple of leases,
Yep.
a couple of permission places, right? And we run cameras year round in those spots just because it's easy for us and we want to.
Yeah.
But then
Right.
I also have, a couple of public spots that I like to focus on every year too. And part of that for me, it's the public spots are kind of it's a double edged sword for me. One, it gives me a place to really continue to like evolve and hone kind of my own woodsmanship skills,
Yeah.
to really learn more, right? And there are places where I'm a little bit less concerned about applying more pressure, right? Because I can go with those high risk, high reward techniques. And if I blow a deer out or it doesn't work out, like it doesn't matter as much because I kind of have my private spots to fall back on.
Right.
But also, like, I've had years too where there's not a deer that I'm interested in shooting, in my private spots. And then I put a lot more pressure on those public spots to try and find, a mature buck that I want to chase after. So it just gives me more options.
I love that about public land, and I hunt both, and I will hunt where anywhere,
Yeah.
even the neighbor's property. No, I'll I love that about public land because I feel like sometimes on private, I'm walking on eggshells and I'm always nervous. I walk in like my stress is so much higher when I'm on private land because I'm like, I'm going to dick this up. I'm going to be out here and it's going to be like the whole rest of the season. There's this, giant buck in here and now he'll never come here again. And public land, I'm always like, all right, you know, I feel like it's almost like a little bit of a Hail Mary shot every time in a way. It's like I'm going deep. I'm freaking going deep every time. And, I'm fortunate enough to live near enough public land where I can do that and not be too concerned because I've got just so much space. And like last year, for example, I had my private land and I had a public area and I had all these spots and I ended up shooting a deer not even in the spots that I had picked out. And I literally, I was walking down a trail during the rut, came over a hill, there's a buck making a rub, shot him from my knees at like 10 yards on the ground, right? And so it all does go out the window on public land because like random stuff can happen anytime, you
Yeah.
know.
Well,
Um,
and the other thing that I think is interesting with that too is like there's so much going back to the trail camera thing. These aren't just pictures of deer, right? Like there's so much additional data tied to these things. Like, when if you're using reveal cameras now, when you get a
yep,
picture, it's like you can look at the moon phase, the wind direction, the barometric pressure, right, and like all of those parts and pieces kind of allow us to learn more about deer, how they operate, why they operate, right? And like if we're really trying to target a specific deer, like learn the traits and characteristics of that deer. But what's also
yep,
interesting to your point is like with all that information, it definitely affects the way I hunt more on private, right? Because I have all this data, right? And I use it to put this plan together.
yep,
The thing that's really fun and that I love about public is because I don't run as many cameras on public, for obvious reasons, right? It's a little bit more of it's like a little bit more of a crapshoot every time you go out there,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's an unknown aspect to it that's somewhat exciting. And even like if you did run 40 cameras on a chunk of public, those deer are so pressured, right? Like by other people in there or neighboring properties that like they move, they change their patterns, they end up doing different things than they did the day before. So like there's always this sense of like unknown that's kind of exciting about those areas.
I love that. And it's like, and I've used trail cameras and I've used boots in the ground scouting successfully, not figuring out always so much what deer I'm going to try to shoot on public land, although that does happen. A lot of times it's like, where do deer go?
Yeah.
And then it's like, now I know where to go, and I go there, and a deer that I've never seen before oftentimes just shows up, and it's like, sweet, you
Yeah.
know. Which I even had on private land. Like I shot a buck on private land here in Michigan. I'd never seen it before. It wasn't even during the rut. It was like mid-October, and it was just they were cutting one bean field on the other property next door, and rather than him going up there, he came down my way, and like it just I knew that was happening, so I went and sat in there. Had no idea what I would see, but like first sit, it happened.
Yeah.
Um, which gives you the warm fuzzies to when you figure out a plan and it works. You know what I'm saying? Like I felt real proud about that one for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like the ultimate goal with like what we do, right? Like we
Yeah.
spend so much time preparing for these seasons, whether it's shooting your bow, scouting, running trail cameras, like analyzing trail camera photos, actual like time spent sitting in a lawn chair, right, with your spotting scope, like watching deer feed into fields in the summer. And man, when a plan comes together, it's a pretty, not only is it a huge accomplishment, right, but like it's a pretty good feeling. But on the other side of that card, I've had the same thing that you just described happen where it's like, I didn't even know this deer existed, right? And like you kind
Yeah.
of want to say it's like, oh, I got lucky, but I don't think you really got lucky, right? Like you were in that spot for a specific reason, and maybe it
Right.
wasn't because of that deer, but it's because of this information that you had learned or taken in or observed in the past, and like you were in the right spot at the right time, and like that's as equally exciting to me, as
Yeah.
a hunter for sure.
Yep. All right. Hang on. I had another question about this. Oh, public land. Okay. So, we get these questions all the time, and we have our own answers, but I would love to hear your kind of take on it. So, people put cameras on public land, and there's always those guys out there who find them and throw them in their backpack. And I always wish they'd at least leave the SD card behind, especially if it's not a like a cell cam. But like, how do you hide your stuff or keep people from stealing it, or don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely make effort too, right? I kind of have this, I don't know. I think, in regardless of what it is, right? Like, let's say you leave your gun or your rifle in your truck and your truck's locked. Like, if somebody wants it bad enough, they're going to
Yeah,
find a way to get it, right? And, like, I think trail cameras are kind of the same thing. Like, you can take all these steps, but if somebody finds it and they're the type of person that is going to steal it, they want it bad enough, like, they're probably going to figure out a way to get it. That
right.
being said, I've definitely found some stuff that helps mitigate that as much as possible. So, like one of the things that I think is the most effective is so like we make the pro version of our camera. It's what's called a no glow camera. So when
Yep.
that camera takes a picture, it doesn't put off any visible light whatsoever, whether it's to a human or an ungulate. So that in itself, right? Like when I'm walking through the woods, especially if it's at night in the morning before it got light out, or at night after it's dark out, like if you see a camera flash go off, right, like that's going to be a pretty good indicator to you that like there's a camera there, and whether that's like a true flash or even like an infrared flash, right?
Yep.
So that's one thing that really helps. Another thing that I do, and I know I didn't invent this, a lot of other people do, right, is instead of hanging cameras at kind of like chest level on the tree, I've definitely moved to like when I'm doing a lot of my scouting and stuff, like I'll carry a stick or two on my pack,
Yeah.
climbing stick. I'll put two sticks up. I'll hang that camera super high and actually angle it down, right? Because typically when people are walking through the woods, they're not looking up in the trees for cameras. So that's another thing I like doing. And then the third thing, which is probably the most obvious, right, is like we sell a security box for our cameras. So you actually put the camera in a steel security box, and then you can run a lock, like a cable lock, through that, actually lock it to the tree. Again, it's not 100% foolproof, right? Like if somebody brings a bolt cutters into the woods, they're going to be able to get it off
Right.
the tree if they really want it. But those like small steps, right? Like whether it's a security box or hanging it high in the tree with a couple of sticks used to get up there, like a lot of times, like 1 degree of separation away from like ease of getting things, I think really deters people from messing with them.
Yeah. I've liked you guys make that tree mount.
Yep.
It's nice because then you can sometimes when you put it up high, you have to like put a stick behind it to like
Yep.
like point it down or whatever, which I'll probably still end up doing with some of my cameras. But the tree mount's cool because it's like you can just kind of swivel it and get that picture real quick, which is very very nice. Just was using
Well,
that the other day.
and the cool thing about that tree mount too is like it's a $9 accessory and it just clips right on the camera. Like you never have to work, like regardless of how high you're hanging your camera, like trees are angled. Sometimes
Yeah,
like the trail that you're trying to focus on is above the camera or below the camera. Like just being able to use that, little mount to get your camera pointed exactly where you want without trying to find the right size stick to shove behind your camera. It's like it's a pretty useful little additional accessory.
yeah, I love that. No, it's yeah, that's helpful. Again, you put it high at work. So I just threw one out, and it's in an old like log, like down like ankle level. Though the one that I got, what I thought was a bear on it,
Yeah.
that turned out to be a raccoon. It's like ankle level. I had to mark it because I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna see it next time that I go out. And I've had that before. I'll put it out and like know the general area, and I have to wait for me to walk by the camera to set it off to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
realize where I put it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's no, it's interesting. I can't say I've had a ton of trail cameras stolen. Thankfully, I try to hide them, and the times that I've had them found, a lot of times people have been cool. Like there are a lot of good people out there who, like I like it. Like they'll walk by and I'll get a picture of them, kind of like they're kind of like they see me out of the corner of my eye, and then they pretend like they can see me, and you can just see that they keep going. It's like, all right, man, it's good. I'm glad about that.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I have to ask. This is a question I got to resurrect. And it's been an ongoing question that we've had here. And I might have asked you this in the past, but say you're walking out, you've got one of those little card reader things for your phone, like an attachment, right?
Yeah.
You're walking on public land, you're way out there. It's like, March, and you're just, looking for sheds or whatever. You see this camera, it's been out there forever. do you check another man's card or not, or do you just let that sit?
I wouldn't
Really?
personally.
You
I would
can
not.
truthfully, or are you just
Truthfully,
saying that
no,
like,
I would.
okay, you would just walk by, you wouldn't even look?
I I mean, I might like give him a little wave or something, but I wouldn't pull his card out and check it. I think honestly, for me, this goes back to like what we were just talking about with like people taking cameras or messing with
Yeah.
cameras. Like, I think there's bad apples out there in any community that you want to talk about, right? But I think like at least from my own anecdotal experience, like
Mhm.
I mean, I've been at this for I don't know how long I've been actually using trail cameras, maybe 15 years, right? And I think I've
Yep.
had one camera stolen. So like I
Yeah.
think like I firmly believe our community of people, right, like hunters, like 99.9% of people are probably the same
Agreed.
as you or I, right? Like whether you decide to check that guy's camera or not, like you're not going to take it. You're not going to take his SD card. Like I think our community is generally like mostly on the same page, right? And like
Yeah.
generally good people with good intentions.
Yeah. You know, I would agree, and I wouldn't check someone's trail camera, at least not publicly admitting it. Just kidding.
I was going to ask you
No.
if you would or not.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I have. I don't usually carry a card reader, so who knows? I've never
Yeah,
had to. Whatever. But I will say, like, I even interactions I have at trailheads with people. Like I'm always, I don't know. You see things what people say online and like videos of interactions of people online or whatever, and it's like, oh man, this, like, you go kind of with trepidation at first, like, is this guy going to be a jerk? And I'm like, I've never had that. I don't know that I've ever had. That was another hunter, at least, a negative experience where someone's just a jerk out in the woods. Which maybe maybe I just got a face for people liking me, but I again, like, I just haven't. Usually it's they're helpful. Usually, I tend to share a lot of information because I'm an open book about stuff, and it's like I'll tell them what I'm doing and where I'm going, and I figure I don't see it as a fixed pie. Like, it's abundance mindset, man. Like, what we're all out here enjoying it together. Your win is my win in some way. So, um, but yeah, I like just echoing what you said. I've not had so much negative experiences with people. I feel like generally it goes pretty well. So no, we just get that question a lot. People will check and just say, I get
yeah,
camera stolen all the time. What do I do? And it's always like, I don't know if I'm good at hiding them or I just live by nice people. I think I've lost two ever,
yeah.
two or three maybe. That maybe I'm forgetting one, but oh no, I lost one last year. I put it out, and at first I'm pretty sure the guy turned it off and turned it down because there was another. I put it up in this tree, and I realized as I was leaving there was another trail camera like right in that area.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, it's public land, whatever. Like, I this is a pretty highly trafficked spot, whatever. So, yeah, he definitely took it, but it was a very cheap camera that I was okay with. Um, what? So, okay, another question, and we get this a lot, or we get information that makes me want to ask this question. I'll say, but like when you're hearing from people, you talk to people all day long that use trail cameras. Like, what are some things like the general public does wrong with trail cameras a lot? And I ask that because we get questions and comments and things, and it's like, I don't know that I'd put that there, face that camera that way, or
yeah,
whatever.
that's a good question. I think probably the biggest thing that I see the most or hear the most is like direction that you're hanging trail cameras, right?
Yep.
So east and west. You never want to hang a trail camera facing directly east or facing directly west if you can avoid it. Now, there's
Right.
situations where you can't avoid it, right? And the reason you don't want to do that is like as the sun rises or as the sun sets, you might have some, like if the sun is, at a low angle because it's rising or setting and it's directly shining into that camera, like it can impact the picture quality that
Yep.
you might get if that picture is triggered. Now, again, sometimes you can't avoid it, and we do things on the back end with our camera technology to try and optimize even for those situations, right? But that's a big one. And then on that same note, like if you're using a solar panel with that camera, make sure that you're hanging that solar panel on the correct side of the tree so that it's getting the majority of as much daylight as possible to collect sunlight, right, to power that camera. So I would say that's probably the number one thing in terms of like, just things that I think sometimes we don't think about, right? Because we get so wrapped up in our own world. Like when we're out there scouting or hanging cameras, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm here, that trail's here. Like I want to get pictures of deer coming down that trail. And just taking that extra second to think about it's like, okay, what direction am I actually facing? What direction is that trail facing? Is there a different tree I could put this camera on so it's not facing directly east or west, right? And like still pick up that trail. I think those are kind of the big one. I think the second one, and I've been guilty of this too, right, is relying too heavily on a camera to give you all of the intel for a given area. And what I mean by that is, like, and I'm guilty of this because I've seen it happen where it's like you put a camera out, right, in this area where maybe you want to hunt or you think you're going to hunt, and two things can happen. Like, one, maybe you get a ton of photos and this seems like a hotbed, or you get no photos and you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't hunt there, right? Let's use the
Yeah.
second example as to kind of continue down this road. I've had that happen where I hang a camera in a spot and like it doesn't seem that good, but maybe I have a stand in there anyways, or I have another reason to go in there and I end up hunting there. And it's like, well, no, it's not that the spot wasn't good. It's just that I didn't put the camera in the right place. Because if you think about it, like the camera's facing one direction, right? There's a lot of other stuff going on, on the
Yeah.
sides or behind that camera, that if you're only relying on that camera to tell you the story, you're missing, a big part of that story too.
Quick shout out to another amazing sponsor of ours, Kafaru International. If you're like us and love hunting in some of the toughest places, you know how crucial having the right gear is. Kafaru makes some of the toughest, most reliable backpacks and tents out there, and it's all made right here in America. Whether you're hunting in the backcountry or headed to your favorite deer stand, Kafaru has you covered. Keep your eyes out this year, especially as they're launching a ton of amazing new products like the new Arc frame that just came out. So next time you gear up for an adventure, make sure to check out Kafaru International. Oh, I think about that every time I put a trail camera out. I'm like, and while it's out, I'm like, well, but what walked behind the camera?
Exactly.
Because it's you're just seeing this,
Yeah.
it drives you crazy, and that's kind of like what keeps you coming back a little bit. For trail, I love it. It's so fun. I feel like we get so serious about trail cameras, and I get why in some sense, putting a million out, not learning anything, but also it's like there's just pure joy in checking a trail camera. In my opinion, it's just one of the more fun things you can do.
Yeah.
So as we get closer to the fall, you're obviously changing what you do with your trail cameras. So how do you adjust or shift as you move towards the fall months?
Yeah, so I'll kind of stick with like the example that I kind of let off with, right?
Yeah.
Previous of like how I'm using them now versus how that changes. So let's say, I've deployed cameras on 5 or 6 spots that I would potentially hunt throughout July, August, and early September. By that point, I'm hoping to have an inventory of a couple deer that I want to go after and know where they're at. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for two things to happen. One, for velvet to come off, right?
Yep.
Two, I'm waiting to see that those bachelor groups of bucks have kind of broken up. And then three, typically wherever you're hunting, there's going to be a change in food source. So, like, one good example of that is, if you're in an ag heavy area, those deer are probably hitting beans pretty hard all summer. At
Yeah.
some point in that kind of general time frame where velvet is coming off, bachelor groups are breaking up, those beans will start to turn brown, right? And those deer are going to transition to a different food source. So
Yeah.
once I see, at least two of those three things happen, that's when I'm going to go out and I'm going to grab all those cameras and typically move them to different areas. So where in the summer I was trying to get inventory of what's there. In the fall, then, so like what I'm calling like actual in season, I'm going to try and deploy those cameras to figure out where those deer are and where they're moving to. So confirm like, I probably have an idea of where they're bedding. I probably have an idea of where they're going to feed. But I want to figure out, I want to pinpoint like what are their actual travel corridors? How are they actually getting from bed to feed back to bed? And that for me, a lot of times means moving those cameras a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
if I deploy those cameras, let's call it, let's just pick a date here. So we open, typically middle of September for us in Wisconsin. So let's say all those things happen, and as I hunt those first few weeks, I'm redeploying cameras in areas that I'm hunting to try and hone in on these travel corridors. Like if I'm not seeing anything for a couple weeks or seeing what I want to see, that means I got to move that camera and look somewhere else. Where in the summer, I might just let those cameras sit for months on end, right? Because I'm just trying to gain inventory.
Right.
In the fall, my focus really shifts. It's like I'm trying to pattern specific deer and really find those deer and learn what their corridor, their home range, their pattern looks like in the season. I can actually hunt them.
Yeah. So you're moving them a lot more in the fall.
Yeah, and I probably move them, more than some other people do, right? Like
They
I typically get, I don't want to say aggressive, but like I'm not going to sit around and wait too long. Like if I'm not seeing what I want to see within a couple weeks, I will very likely move that camera to try and gain more intel, because really like in that point of the season, my only goal is to gain intel. So if I'm not gaining intel from a camera, to me that tells me like I need to move it or put it somewhere else.
you're just burning battery at that
Yep.
point.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. No, I know. We do similar stuff, and it's just as you do it more and more, you kind of hone in on what you like, and it's different between people, but and we do the same thing. I will say, I'm just remembering thinking back to common mistakes. And this is, I remember this because I remember going out to get this camera as fall started to move it into a new spot. I had found a little area on public land where there was these islands, but the islands were connected together by almost like kind of like a beaver dam in between. It really was a beaver dam that just kind of grew up, but so it was like a narrow passage, and it was like hard to get to, super cool spot. And I'm like, I'm putting a camera out, and maybe I'll get beavers on camera, and I'll get some deer or whatever. Put it kind of low to the ground. I didn't want it too high, and I figured down low, like no one can see it, like from a ways away, and very few people are gonna like walk out into the muck. This will be perfect. It worked for like a week, and then as it greened up, all like it grew, like the grass overtook it. And so
Mhm.
like I got there for the fall, like this is gonna be sweet. This camera's been out here for like months, and I practiced all this restraint by not checking it, and going out for the fall to move it. I'm like, I literally got thousands of pictures of just green, just green over the front of the camera. So keep an eye on that too when you're putting cameras out.
Well, that's the beauty of cell cams now too, right? Like you don't have to
Yep.
wait, or be patient for months on end, like trying to show self restraint to go out there. It's like if a limb falls down or if grass grows up, like you
Yep.
can see that in real time, um, and go to move it. Or like as much as I talked about moving cameras in the fall too, like if I once I get a picture of one of those target bucks on a camera, like I'm a lot less likely to move it, because what I'm trying to do at that point is really like triangulate, right? So it's like
Yeah.
I want to find that deer in as many places, in his home range
Love
as
that.
possible, because then that's like giving me more data. It's like, okay, I know he's coming from this direction at this time, and I can kind of work backwards, right? So like once I get a picture or two of a deer on a camera, like and again, I know some guys would argue against this, but like I typically then won't move that camera because I know that he's been there at least once, and there's a good chance he might be back. So I'm just trying to build on my library of places where I can get information about that specific deer too. And like I said, use that to kind of triangulate a plan of where I'm going to try and intercept that deer.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's a great tip. And trying to get trying to get a deer on as many spots as possible is smart, because you start to put pins in the map and just say, all right, here's this area. See how it changes throughout the year. That's awesome.
Well, and
Well,
you can.
Greg, yeah,
Oh, sorry. I was just saying you can
that,
use any tool you want to do that, right? Like with our
yeah,
new app, you can do it right in our app, which is cool, right? Like it's super convenient. But if you're somebody who uses a different platform, it doesn't matter how you do it, but just like having that information about multiple different spots, a place a buck's been frequenting, like it becomes invaluable.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. So okay, so this year, where are you at in your trail camera, like putting out? Like how many do you have out? How many are you putting out? What does your trail camera scouting look like this year?
So, like I said, I have three private places that I hunt, and we pretty much run cameras year round there. So all of those places are, fairly well established. We've had cameras going for multiple years, kind of all year long. So those places are pretty set, because
Yeah.
having hunted them as long as we have, we know where those cameras need to be, and they don't get moved as much. Here and there, a handful of them throughout the season.
Yep.
But right now, for me, is like where I'm really kicking off my exploratory kind of like portion of my season on those chunks of public. So,
Yeah.
I've got a few out already, a handful, but I've got a bunch of them ready to be deployed. And really, my goal is always like by the second week of July is when I like to have that stuff out.
Yep.
So I'll be spending the next month here, putting out probably another 20 or so, right, on different various chunks of public. And then I'll use those cameras for kind of the rest of the summer to inform me if those are places I want to spend any time this fall or not.
Yeah. I love that. No, mine is similar. I've got one spot that's like a thing to get to, so it's like I got to plan it, make sure my cameras are all ready. And like some of them are easy. I can pop out and throw one out during the day, during the work day or at lunch or something. But like some is like, one's like, you got to get a kayak. You got to take the kayak. It's like 3/4 of a mile into the woods with a kayak, then put it in the water, go out to the spot. And, it's like, all right, when that happens, that's like a half a Saturday
Yeah,
deal. So you
yeah.
got to strategically spread it out because everybody's got all, responsibilities and stuff they got to handle as well. But it's such a fun time of year. I love doing this. I love scouting. I love exploring, spending time in the woods, and just poking around. So fun.
Well, and if you can combine certain tasks too, like whether it's trimming shooting lanes, planting food plots,
Yeah.
like, anything that you're doing in the woods, anyways, like it's a great way to kind of get a little bit more bang for your buck, right? It's like you can do that, and while you're doing that, deploy cameras as well. If the opportunity presents itself, right? Like a lot of times you're not
Oh
doing
yeah.
a lot of that stuff on public, but I definitely like to try and get a twofer, in any situation that I can this time of year because yeah, time is of the essence for sure.
My go-to move, and I do this all winter. Uh, like if I part of my workout is running for the day, like if that's the it's run day, I scout a ton and run. It's
Yeah,
like the winter, I am running. I run. My thought is like February, March. It's like as much new places that I can run in the middle of the woods and find, the better. And I'll still do that in the fall. I'll grab a trail camera. I'll go for a run, if it's July, and then throw one out in a certain spot and feel real good about it. And like you check two things off the list and you feel good
heck
about the
yeah,
rest of your day.
yeah. Throw some weight in the pack and do a little ruck, and also
Exactly.
cameras while you're at it. It's like that's a lot better or a lot more interesting to me than just spending time in the gym too. So get outside,
Oh,
get some fresh air, and you get to hang some cameras.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Well, we'll call this a day now. We'll probably have you back, Greg, and maybe we'll talk like in season stuff here pretty soon, closer to season, and maybe we'll talk about some of the other things you guys have going on here at some point this year too, because you guys at Tactacam are working on some pretty cool stuff right now, which has been really fun to see.
Yeah, another little less than a month, we'll have a lot of exciting new stuff to talk about as well. So probably be a good time to run this one
Yes.
back and add some more color to some of those conversations.
I would love that. Yeah, we'll have you back. And as people listen to this, write in with questions you have. We'll talk. We'll run questions by Greg that you ask, and we'll go through anything you want to know. So this is your opportunity. So in the meantime, for people who are listening, Greg, how can they follow along with the things that you guys are working on, get updates on products and things like that?
Yeah, so obviously, we're pretty active across the social channels, getting tied into the Reveal Instagram account, Facebook page. If you're interested, it's great. We're starting to do a lot more YouTube content, both, kind of aspirational stuff, but also informational stuff. So you'll see a lot more of the kind of like technical, like nitty gritty stuff, Q&A type stuff. That stuff will start showing up on there more often. The other great way to like really stay in tune to new stuff and what's coming down the pipe is if you just go on the website and sign up for our email list. You'll always be the first to know when new products drop. We push out a lot of that, informational stuff from our other channels through that email list as well. So that's a great way to stay in touch with us, is getting signed up for that email list.
Awesome. Yeah, check it out. I've been signed up and been following you guys for a while, and especially this year. So I appreciate you coming on. So everybody go give them a follow and stay tuned. We'll have more information here soon, and excited to continue to talk deer prep and things for over the next few weeks. So looking forward to next week. We'll see you soon.